Good afternoon, everyone. It's Dr. Gershon with another Endeavor Better Health webinar and podcast. I am truly thrilled to have a friend and a colleague here, Felix Lee, who's the U.S. Digital Healthcare Medical Head of Sanofi. We're here today to talk about the next decade of AI from the perspective of an industry leader who is going to help us define the new digital pathway for Bio-Pharma, specifically from a Sanofi perspective. First, before introducing you to Felix, who's really an industry leader, I would like, as I always do, to thank everybody for being incredibly supportive of the Endeavor Better Health open source platform, the webinar, the podcast, which now has 1.3 million views, and we're expanding out with new partnerships with Biospace. And as part of this expansion, we encourage everyone to please give us questions, give us feedback. And when you log on, tell us where you're logging in from. If we don't have a chance to answer any of your questions on the live webinar, feel free to put your email in, and either myself or Felix will gladly get back to you with an answer. So let me just shift the screen over and introduce you to Felix Lee. He is really an industry leader. I don't say that lightly. He has both the really admirable qualities of being strategic and visionary, and will give us an insight into the next 5 or 10 years as he sees it in the digital healthcare space, but also is a real operator and spends his time making sure that businesses grow, that partnerships are developed, and that projects are driven by teams with proficiency. And I think in this regard, I do want to highlight the fact that I personally believe that Sanofi is a leader in the biopharma space, making a clear decision a couple of years ago to go digital in a very big way. With their Future for Care program, they have put a significant amount of time, effort, and money into partnerships with Generali, Capgemini, Orange, to build an accelerator to drive digital healthcare with more than 50 companies in the accelerator currently. They put a significant amount of money, over $1 billion, into investments in digital health. And I think this is really part of what the Endeavor Better Health platform is all about, which is looking at leaders, and both on the industry side and on the entrepreneur founder side. So with that segue, I really want to introduce you to a leader, Felix Lee. Felix, thank you so much for coming today. I'm excited about hearing your vision. I know you've put a lot of time and effort into looking forward and bringing a vision into a very operational and practical focus for industry. So welcome here. And if you could spend a little time telling us about yourself and your vision and the things that you do for Sanofi, that would be a great starting point.
Thank you very much, Martin. It's my pleasure, and I feel honored to be amongst to be here with you and with the audience today. So thank you everyone for taking some time out of your busy schedules and over your lunchtime if you're here in the East Coast. So I'm very pleased to be able to share some of the lessons learned over my years working in this space, but also I think moreover lessons learned in not only designing innovation but also deploying innovation and making sure innovation is implemented, because I think we talk about having innovation in terms of strategy. We design products, but then if they're not implemented, then they don't bring the value that they need to. And of course, people is the other part of the equation to bring innovation forward. So maybe a little bit about my background and who I am. So I've spent over 20 years in different aspects of innovation. So I've worked on expansion of business lines, building out partnerships, building out products, and also developing new services. I've had the fortune of living and working across 5 countries. So I was born in Hong Kong, grew up in England, worked in the UK, in Hong Kong, also in China, very briefly, also in Singapore, and then and then in Paris before coming to the US. And I've also had the opportunity to work across different sectors, inside and outside healthcare. So I spent 5 years in my career in the B2B marketing space, B2B media in terms of trade shows, online marketplaces, trade magazines, for a B2B media company that used to be listed on the Nasdaq before it became it got taken private by private equity. And then within healthcare, it's been fortunate to work across different parts of the healthcare ecosystem. In the UK, I worked on managing a formulary for hospital group. So being on the provider side, a provider slash payer. I've spent 3 years in healthcare investments, so building out investments in pharma, medtech, and healthcare services across the world, looking at not only listed companies but also some private companies and direct investments as well. And then in the last 9 years, I've been working in Sanofi, really more as an operator, but more on the strategic side, looking at new product planning. That typically can span anything from 2-3 years out to 10 years out, depending on which phase of drug development you happen to be in. So I've worked from the commercial side of drug development from phase 1 all the way through to pre-launch and launch, and also in life cycle development, managing developing new formulations, indication expansions for existing drugs that still have a lot of value to the patients out there, and have over my time spent time with business development opportunities, both in licensing and out licensing as well. So my current role right now in the US, looking at digital healthcare from the medical side, is really much more of an operator role versus a strategic role. But at the same time, the digital healthcare, as I think you can all attest to, it's very strategic in nature and is constantly evolving. So managing the strategy and the execution of that, takes a lot of nuanced balance between the high level and the operational. So I think one of the first topics that I think Martin has been alluded to is thinking about a roadmap for the next 10 years. And in fact, one of my projects back earlier last year actually took a look at AI and big data, and looking at what the roadmap could be, in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think a couple of key takeaways I want to share with you, that you may or may not agree with, and be happy to hear different perspectives and different versions of what your take is. But it's the fact that in the next 10 to when we look at AI and big data, in healthcare, it's really we're talking about something that is more evolutionary than revolutionary. Because the reason I say that is because the technology and the techniques and the it's already there, with things like machine learning, large language model, big data, analytics, etc. Capabilities are there. But when you try to bring this kind of innovation into healthcare and into different aspects of healthcare, this is where this evolution actually is revolutionary. Because healthcare as a whole takes so long to adopt innovation, and technological innovation. And it's not that the techniques and the hardware or the software is not there, but being able to integrate it into the workflow, being able to figure out how the regulatory side of things and the governance will work, how to ensure patient safety whilst we're deploying deploying the innovation, and also how do we make that and put that into the workflow, of health systems and of people who are using the technologies, and even just people's perception and trust towards new technologies, as sometimes, especially with AI, machine learning, etc., can be much more of a black box, than typically what we understand with things like drug mechanisms and how things work, etc. So also, I think, just big picture speaking, we are at a very exciting time with digital health in healthcare, being able to deploy the technologies that are already out there. And I think we all have a part to play to take this, evolution, into and make it into a revolution, for healthcare in whichever parts of healthcare we work in. So that's kind of my overall big picture for I think what the roadmap looks like. And of course, when we look at digital health, the first thing is different people have very different understanding of what digital health is to begin with, and I'm sure you've seen examples of that. And when you look at the pharma sector, I think it's no different. So when you look across different big companies in pharma, who are doing things in digital health, you've probably seen the projects are in different shapes and sizes, and the focus is quite varied, because we can be deploying digital health to improve and drive the efficiency and accelerate drug discovery and development. There are companies who are working, for example, in diagnostics, imaging, automating that, and things of that nature. There's also clinical decision support, clinical decision support systems, to support and enhance our ability to make clinical decisions at the right time for the right people. And then there is digital health being deployed across treatment modalities, treatment and disease management. So it's a very, very wide spectrum, and then you add overlay on top of that. A lot of companies across different industries are also in a digital transformation in terms of their own processes, in terms of their own efficiencies, and their own acceleration. So I think one of my first lessons, in kind of looking at digital health in the pharma space is it's not clear cut. It's not easy to understand what different people want in pharma, and different pharma companies do their different things. So digital health doesn't mean the same thing, to all pharma companies. And this is something that I think we all grapple with. In Sanofi, we even ourselves, we are very diverse, about where we are and what aspects of digital health we're into. So our R&D part of the company is looking at digital enablers to help improve the efficiency of clinical trial recruitment, and looking at speeding up drug discovery, targeting, etc. And also in different aspects of drug development, how can we run studies more efficiently? How can we improve the probability of success by deploying AI into our workflow, so that we actually are able to design studies that actually will and develop drugs in a way that will optimize and improve the efficiency and productivity of our pipeline. And then we also have in the manufacturing and supply side of our operations, looking at what is state of the art manufacturing, especially in biologics, and how do we optimize for that. And we have the chief digital office inside our company that looks at developing the right digital infrastructure and architecture and data relationships with vendors, etc. So that as a whole company, we are we are digital ready, and we optimize deploying digital in our business units, for things like omni-channel marketing and 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 improving engagement with our customers, etc. And then we've got Sanofi Ventures arm that also has a mandate looking, and part of their mandate is looking at digital health, and they have some focus into specific parts of digital health that that will bring synergies with the business down the line. And of course, Martin already alluded to another initiative that we have in Sanofi with external collaborators for Future for Care, which is a digital accelerator, working with innovators and startups out there. So even inside Sanofi, I can't put my hand up and say I know everything that is going on within digital health. And one of the things that I've stopped becoming embarrassed about actually is people like Martin. Like the other day, introduced me to a colleague of mine working in a different part of the company, in digital health, whom I didn't know. And that's quite normal, in a company that has 100,000 people, that I will. It's sometimes people on the outside, it can connect the dots easier with the different things that are happening, versus us on the inside. So I think one aspect of working with of wanting to work with pharma is that especially with the bigger companies, you might kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince, because you're talking to a lot of you may have connections to different people seemingly working in the area that you may be interested in, but at the same time you may end up finding it they sit in a very different part of the organization, and sometimes it may not be that we may not even have the internal efficiency, to connect the dots in that way. So working, mapping out and figuring out who's who and who does what inside bigger companies, I think is part of the game, in figuring out. Just figuring out who you need to talk to, and who may find your product or services of value.
Perfect segue. Incredible overview of a very large and complex organization and your role in it. And it's a perfect segue, really, because a lot of the focus here today will be about opening people's vision about how potentially to work with Sanofi. And in a broader sense, how young entrepreneur founders who have great innovation can begin to understand more and more the mindset of the digital transformation within large industry for partnership, for collaboration, for networking. Embedded in the Endeavor BetterHealth platform is this open source mentality, which speaks to bringing founders together with industry leaders. So I would love to take this conversation to a deeper operational roadmap, which is understanding about how large pharma seeks to work with emerging companies. It's embedded in Future for Care vision and mission. It's embedded in the Sanofi Ventures community mindset. Bringing innovation in-house, whether it's through an accelerator program or a direct investment, all speaks to opportunity. And one of the things that I find as the senior executive investor in residence at Techstars is that young entrepreneur founders feel very often that large industry doesn't want to speak with them unless they have a certain level of revenue generation. My feeling, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, is it's not about revenue generation. It's about the ability to take your innovation and be accretive to industry. and finding that language where you can sit at the table with an industry partner to bring value to them and understand that it's a large business with lots of headwinds and tailwinds. There's resource allocation decisions, political decisions, timing, quarter by quarter decisions, lots of things that go into integration, which often is at odds with how young founders expect their innovation to be picked up, utilized, and invested in. So I would love to talk a little bit about your experiences in this intersection between the discourse between founder entrepreneurs and industry leaders with a mindset towards utilizing innovation in a business like format.
Yeah, and I think what some of what you said is I fully agree with. You know, so first I think there is, as with all businesses, the financial environment, what's happening in the macro environment, geopolitical risk, etc. All have some kind of a impact, on um, how businesses have in terms of their appetite to take risks, and also how resource allocation decisions are made. And I think you've seen, or we've seen, that in the digital health space. It ebbs and flows. We have big companies that do things. They are We can all be very vocal about when we start something, but then we also see that over time, there's been companies coming in and out of digital health in different ways, right? So a couple of months ago, Biogen announced that they were closing down their digital health unit of 150 people, and then a few months ago, Novartis has some restructuring with their digital health teams, and also and then I think in the last couple of days, AstraZeneca had also um, they they are going to spin off something that is around digital health, etc. So I think we see many different directions of how people take, and it does kind of ebb and flow. And so I wouldn't be and that, combined with how digital health is so broad in its definition, I think makes it all the more challenging when it comes to finding the right people to talk to. Which part of the organization you talk to can also sometimes mean whether you are revenue generating or not, and what stage of business you are in. Whether you want to sell a an already commercialized solution versus you want to do some pilot testing. It can vary a lot depending, the appetite for these different spectrum of business collaborations can be very different depending on which part of the company you talk to. So I think one of the things that we all, both us in big pharma, and as well as innovators, smaller companies, etc. I think we really have to play our role in defining and communicating clearly with each other. What role are we playing in digital health, and also what we are looking for. So
Great.
so for example, the role that I play today is, I sit inside, a business unit, one of the business units, global business units called General Medicines, and my focus in digital health is patient-facing digital solutions that help improve the management of chronic conditions. So that's the area that I'm looking at, and we work with um, um, we work with companies that already have the innovation, for example, and we collaborate with them to accelerate commercialization. For example, beginning of last year, we signed a commercial partnership agreement with a company called Bio-Health, which is a multi-condition chronic platform with software, hardware, connected hardware devices that support and facilitate behavior change to improve the management of chronic conditions like diabetes, but not only, but and also hypertension, weight management, and musculoskeletal pain and behavioral health. And so my focus is around this area, and we're developing a new revenue model, new business model that is separate, from the drugs model. But then if, for example, if you talk to, some of my colleagues in other, parts of the business that are focused on specific, brands of drugs that, they are working on, their digital solution focus, maybe trying to look at, companion digital solutions that help along the patient journey of people, say, with, atopic dermatitis for Dupixent, or asthma for Dupixent, and looking at, how to help them better understand their own disease journey and help them become, stay more adherent on the medication, etc. And then, of course, when you talk to my R&D colleagues, they are looking at optimizing clinical trials, recruitment, optimizing for timelines, optimizing, for probabilities of success, and knowing which study centers to go to, etc., etc. And then when you talk to my ventures, colleagues, then they are looking at, they are potentially looking at, Series B, Series C, or whichever stage that they are focused on with, particular, ticket sizes that they may be, that they find more optimal. And that's also different, to when you talk to our colleagues in Future for Care. They are looking at, incubator kind of acceleration type of companies and entrepreneurs. So I think even within the same company, and that exactly goes to my point of saying, depending on where you go and who you talk to, you kind of need to find the right pockets for the right people to talk to. So don't be too despondent if you end up not, connecting with somebody of a company that you really want to develop a relationship with, but at the same time, it turns out to be, what you thought. Because at the end of the day, I think we all know businesses are done, through people, and people, and people connect through having relationships. So I think investing time in that is very important. And also I think, because digital health also is such is evolving so quickly in the marketplace. And I always say that digital health doesn't belong to any particular player or segment, in healthcare. It's not owned by the payers, it's not owned by the providers, it's not owned by the pharma companies, it's not owned by the device companies. So everybody has a part to play, and everybody knows that, there is some future potential with digital health. Then the question is, how do we work together to think about, first defining what the right problems are to solve to begin with, and then, how different solutions and different technologies can help us get there, faster, help us get there more efficiently, and help us get there more effectively, and looking at also the outcomes that come out of it as well.
Yeah, no, that's just so well said. And it's a perfect segue to my next question, which really is, again, on a little bit, even a deeper level on an operational basis, what I would call leadership skill sets in the digital era. My personal belief is that this is a tremendous opportunity to use technology like generative AI to free up our time as human beings. What that means is, how are we going to spend that time? We're going to spend it in the most productive ways to move our companies closer, to move early stage companies forward, to grow, to scale, to commercialize. From my perspective as an investor, there's four things that we look for. We look for a leader and a CEO founder who can adapt, pivot, and grow, who knows how to build teams that can execute and deliver on what they tell you as an industry leader they can deliver. The differentiating point for us between 100 AI companies that are doing somewhat similar things is the ability for these companies to develop partnerships, collaboration, and real human contact, because that is sustainable. Technology moves so rapidly that whatever you think you're the leader in today, you might not be tomorrow. So for us, it's about the leadership skill sets that are learned and incorporated into building these relationships, sitting along other two pieces, which high demand and high liquidity corridors for us to make investments. And then the last piece in our four-part evaluation, who on the strategic side is sitting next to you that can vouch for you, that can social proof you, that can help you build data sets to show that your product is commercially important and accretive, that's when we bring syndicate partners in. So I would like for you perhaps to talk about some of the stories. It could be about Dario or others where you have seen leadership in the sense that leaders first understand one of the key things that you mentioned, which is identification of problems within an industry, within a company, means research. Very often, industry leaders tell me that companies come to them thrilled with their own technology, but not understanding how that technology can potentially be used in multiple use cases to solve problems within industry. So that research piece is difficult because of the things that you said. In a large organization, it's fragmented. But doing that research and coming to the table with ideas, or even better, ask, what are your pain points? What are the problems that you need help solving? And can we, in some fashion, shape our teams and our technology to provide solutions? That simple gesture. So I would love to hear more about the things that you've seen that have worked, because in my perspective, there is a mind body success triangle. When you find something that is successful, you feel it, your brain senses it, and you want to do more and repeat and double down on that. So I would love to give by example to some of the entrepreneur founders that are listening today your experience about leadership.
Yeah, so I think on the other side of the table, we always also have the same problem. We see a lot of different companies that offer things that look, on the surface quite similar. And also we have to then decide, who do we spend more time with, and who do we go, who do we try to understand deeper and better, so that we know whether things, there is a fit or not. And I think a lot of the time I find that often people on the other side of the table can be too quick to jump to what problem can I solve for you, even before you have a mutual understanding of what, where people are sitting, what they're doing, and what kinds of, problems are the things that are there day to day, and etc. Because you may not end up needing to spend a whole time, a whole hour in a conversation if you realize that, it's not the right, it's not the right fit in terms of the right person you want to talk to. But you may want to leverage that conversation to end up, being introduced to somebody else who may be, better suited to having a deeper conversation. And um, and 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 because in big companies, processes do take a long time, and we know that, unfortunately. And so the time we spent engaging in conversation that potentially may lead to something, that could be a project, can be a pilot, it can be, a master services agreement, or whatever it is. We want to feel that it's worth the while to spend all that time working through the internal processes in order to actually get there, as well. So we also have our internal pain points that we need to consider, and so having a longer term view to developing the relationship versus just trying to conclude the transaction, I think, is to me quite an important element of that leadership style, and how you would approach these conversations, and also just being mindful of the time that may actually be needed to actually, develop the relationship, find a fit, and then, together work out something that, may be feasible, and then putting it into execution. I mean, unfortunately, even just a contracting process for an agreement, in companies such as ours, can take, can be long, can take anything from 1 to 3 months. So even just in the contracting phase, and that's already after you've decided, you know what you want each other to bring to the table, and you know what you want out of the relationship. So 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 I think sometimes, and so I agree with what Martin has said in the past. Try to look for things that are smaller, bite size, easier to get into, something like a pilot, as a smaller piece of the puzzle, to try and solve, rather than try too big, and swallow something that could it could take a lot more than you had bargained for, in the beginning.
Yeah.
And 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 we also, I think, have a lot of trigger points, milestones that we may, want to phase it out, so that it's also de-risked, from our perspective, as well.
Such great points. I would say that element that you just talked about, which is empathy on both sides of the table, understanding what is the risk involved, in human resources, financial resources. Um, these things are measured quite closely, in large companies. And so, I think it's very critical to understand that the strength of the relationship and partnership that you build allows you to be flexible and to adjust in an iterative fashion. So you may have a project that you've secured, and it may have some important successes, but some failures. And you may be able to take those successes and double down on those and evolve that relationship so that you can bring something that's accretive and valuable to your industry partner. You can only do that if you develop trust and good communication and belief that both parties can do what they say they're going to do. And that piece comes to one of the differentiating points for us as investors. We hear from hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs about fantastic innovation and technology that can do this or could do that, or we believe we can go here. That's all fantastic. But in this day and age, when we're in a liquidity crisis, which we believe at Endeavor is a 10 to 14-year time frame, the cost of money is high. In fact, it's actually back to normal. And therefore, an investment, either from an institutional investor, a corporate VC, or from an industry partner, has to be more closely measured with real data. And so one of the things that's important in this process is developing an efficient, productive team that can really execute on the technology. And I know on an operator level, that is your wheelhouse, that is your forte, to be able to bring companies like Dario forward in a successful operational basis. What I would say to entrepreneurs, the take-home message is that you have industry leaders like Felix, industry leaders like Sanofi at large, with multiple different departments, whether it's on the corporate side, the venture side, the accelerator side, who want to work with you. They're looking for opportunities and really coming together with a narrative that brings the industry speak or language together with the entrepreneur speak or language is part of what I hope the next 10 years will look like. Because we have tremendous technology here. The question is the use cases. And the question is the ability to execute on those use cases. So first and foremost, I really want to thank Felix for bringing this incredible overview, but also a granular perspective on what is important in industry, in digital, at Sanofi. And I want to take just a few minutes to thank some people who have logged on, because without you as viewers and supporters, we would not be here today. So Abraham from Nigeria, thank you. Angel from New York, Michael from Pennsylvania, Ray from San Francisco, Severance from Palm Beach, Jenny from New York. Hi, Jenny. Rebecca from Boston. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Harvey Castro, who's going to be a guest in a couple of weeks. Welcome, Harvey. And Henrietta, please continue to be supportive. We really love your input. We're looking forward to seeing you over the next several weeks. I hope everyone has an incredible holiday. Felix and I are actually going to celebrate the beginning of the holiday with a cup of coffee this afternoon, so I'm looking forward to that. But thank you so much, everyone, for signing on, and I just really want to extend a deep thank you to you, Felix, for all the input.
My pleasure, and it's absolutely great to be having this conversation with you. And I really think there's a lot of value in bringing like what you do with Endeavor and these Better Health series to bring different people to the table to have these kinds of dialogues.
Well, thank you so much. This will be one of many conversations that we will have. We had some great comments. I'll just put a couple up here very quickly. It's just lovely. Oh, I have a quick question actually for you here. Chronic condition management.
Okay, for the non-English native speakers, such as
Yes.
Hispanic Latinos in the US, and how can we better serve from a health equity and digital health perspective? It's a very good point. And I think one of the potential that I see for digital health is that you really can personalize interventions, health interventions, to much more specificity, than we otherwise have been able to do with, for example, drugs. And so with a lot of the chronic disease management platforms, for example, in Dario, there are multiple languages, and even with the coaching function, they have Spanish speakers, with coaching, with coaches as well. And so, and with, it's not about just the language, it's also about the cultural understanding from people who are speaking the language, who are from, those parts of the world that may also have different health beliefs and also have, different value systems, and how that, impact on how, how people behave and make choices, and how they see and perceive, what healthcare intervention is something that speaks to them more specifically than just a general intervention. So I really see that digital health can help bridge some of that health equity gap, but at the same time, I think we have to be mindful that it doesn't exacerbate or create other gaps that we don't intend, that we don't intend. And for example, I think in one of my other panel discussions recently, we've also talked about, well, what about people with some disabilities who for example, people who have hearing impairment or visual impairment, then what happens then with things like digital interventions? And so I think in the design and development of digital solutions, I think we have to be quite mindful of that and take into account the audience we're trying to serve and how to minimize the disparities that we may otherwise create as we seek to solve some of the other gaps that exist today in the healthcare space.
Well, that is a perfect segue for future webinar podcasts with a focus in on diversity, equity, inclusion, and the risks and benefits that AI and digital technologies have in that sector. And I can already think of who I'm going to invite to join you in that. So thank you again, Felix. Thank you, Angel, for a really thought-provoking question to finish this webinar today. We're quite a bit over our time limit, but it's been such a dynamic afternoon. I just wanted to continue this great conversation. Felix, stay on for a couple minutes. I'm going to say so long to everybody and end the session. I look forward to seeing everyone next Tuesday at 12 o'clock. Please log on and register for our webinar next week. Look forward to everyone having a great holiday. Take care.
Take care, everybody.